Andy Austin here with the next chapter from The Rainbow Machine, Tales from a Neurolinguist's Journal by Andrew T. Austin. This is the learning chapter. Now, to summarize, this chapter is all about submodalities and how we accidentally can teach people the wrong thing. Submodalities in NLP, for those who are familiar, are the analogical relationship we have with the content. So the content is the thing itself. The submodalities is how we think of the thing. And using the left-right brain metaphor, because it doesn't really hold up to scientific scrutiny, essentially we can say the left brain is very much the contents, the right brain is very much the submodalities or the analogical relationship. So we have digital relationship on the left, analogical relationship on the right. One of the problems is some people, when teaching, create very bad analogical relationships to the content that they are offering. And I'm just thinking back to some of the teachers I had at school. I remember we had one particular guy on the Facebook group, the school reunion Facebook group, which is quite popular with people. And I've got to say, horrifyingly, the in memoriam section on that particular group, it's just amazing to me. I'm only 49 years old or thereabouts. Just how many people I went to school with in my year group aren't here anymore because they've died. It's like, oh my God, how many people are left? And that's come as quite a shock to me, because obviously as we get older, there's fewer people around because people start dying off. And it is quite shocking just how many people from school aren't here anymore, which is pretty sad, really. But anyway, one of the teachers we had at school I can think of, he was absolutely insane. And those who went to school with me will remember the man I'm talking about. He was in the junior school. And the problem is he was clearly bipolar, and everyone was terrified of him, and he was also quite abusive to the children. The thing is, he was also a brilliant teacher. His lessons were quite, I guess because of his madness, quite eccentric and quite energized, and he was really good at explaining concepts. It's just that the environment in which we were in was, I can't put it any other way, it was child abuse. And what's interesting is how many people in the discussion on the forum look back and go, yeah, I think we were abused as kids. And yeah, I think that would count. There's no way those behaviors that he did back then would fly these days. There's no way in a million years he would undoubtedly end up in court. As it was, he actually saw promotion and ended up becoming mayor of the town. This is the way things go, I suppose. Now, the environment in which the thing is taught is quite important, because we've got the analogical relationship, which is effectively the container in which the digital content is delivered. And it's useful to have these things either aligned with each other so it works quite well, or congruent in a way that is useful. So sometimes you may want to create the container in which humor can happen in order to talk about something very, very serious. Sometimes you may want to have a serious container in order to talk about something quite light. It all depends on what it is what the end result is, what we're trying to achieve. And I just think of, say, stand-up comedians these days, who give very cutting, very biting political satire and social commentary. And what they're doing is often are referring to really dark and really unpleasant subjects. And they're doing so in a container of good humor, and people are laughing at these things because there's a shock element, but at the same time it's a light way of exploring the content, which is pretty horrible. Now, teachers in schools, I think the most common thing that happens, certainly from my memory, is that the way things are taught are just totally uninspiring. I just, again, to be very critical of my education, because I think it deserves to be criticized because it was so bad. We were given books to read in English literature. For one of the year groups, I like the books. One was called The Lotus Caves, which I know was a very popular book back in the 80s. And I really liked that one. And then we had things like Lark Rise to Candleford and other stuff that no teenager in a million years is going to have any interest in. And it made no sense to me back then, and it still makes no sense to me now, why the content that is being given did not match the analogical relationship that they're trying to create. And of course, how are we then reading these books in silence in the classroom? who reads books in a group, in silence, in a classroom? That is not how people tend to read. So the delivery of these things didn't make much sense. And often attaching monotony to the subject is crazy. Now, the container by which the thing is delivered is the submodality set. And this is one of those things that I think people need to pay much more attention to and really make more of a study of. What are the submodalities of your communication? What are the submodalities of the presentation of information that is being given? And does it match the thing that you're trying to achieve? So, for example, the room itself lends itself to certain submodality sets. The austere echo of an institutionalized room under strip lighting. Lighting may be ineffective. It may have a flicker going on in one of the tubes. I mean, I know people will be familiar with these environments. The institutional echo of a lot of these places, I just find it staggering. How does that change the behavior of people within those environments? How does it change their identity, how they feel, whilst we then deliver information to them? Within that context as well of the chapter, I referred to my brief military experience, and I just wanted to clarify a thing on that line that's in there. When I worked for the military, I was never in the military. I was never signed up. I was never a squaddy or anything else. I worked for the military as a contractor. Actually, I was part of a psychological experiment. I was part of a group of people. We flew over to Germany to go and work in a military base hospital and live in the barracks with the squaddies, with the military people as civilians. And I think 4 of us in our group went over. There were other people doing it as well in other things. And essentially it was, how would the military receive us and how would we receive the military as civilians living amongst the military, but not under the jurisdiction of the military other than the job function when we're on shift at the hospital. And the reason I did this predominantly was because money. There was a lot of money on offer to sign up. And I saw the advert on my way into the hospital building that I was working in at the time in Southampton, saw the poster, saw how much money they were offering, thought, I'll sign up for that. And they said, oh yeah, and you'll get to go, you can use the gun ranges and there'll be opportunities to go up in helicopters and all of that kind of stuff. There wasn't any of that kind of stuff whatsoever. That was the recruitment poster, in which in no way bared any relationship to reality. So I kind of figured they conned us a bit, but the money was very, very good. And I was there, I think, for 4 months, maybe 3 months, not long time ago now. What caught my attention when I was there, and it was something I was a little bit familiar with, having come from a Navy family. So I was familiar growing up with Navy bases and military and Navy discipline, and my father being in the Navy, that kind of stuff. So I was very familiar with a lot of the stuff. And it was the saluting and the ritual and the uniform that is giving away the analogical container in which the communication would occur. And that's the example I gave in the chapter. So when a lower ranking individual meets a higher ranking individual, they know the relationship's already set. And communication occurs within that container of relationship that is set by the insignia, by the uniform, by all of the stuff that is taught. So everyone knows what relationship they have with everybody else. And I recognized how easy that makes communication. As somebody who's marginally socially impaired, when it comes to social interactions, I recognize that when we have ritual within society, people know what to do. And in our modern times, we've largely eroded social rituals as a way of, like, every social ritual and somehow oppresses somebody. Somebody's being oppressed by that. So we've done away with all of this etiquette and rules of social engagement. And I just think it confuses the hell out of the young people who have got no idea how to behave. And when you put people in a fairly regimented environment where the analogical relationships are set and understood by everybody, they know how to talk to each other. So this is where my thinking then went. I started to see a relationship in the terms of content and analog or digital and analogical aspects of communication, and then submodality sets and, get this, saluting and insignia and uniforms of the military. There's a direct relationship with how these things start to form the relationship that people have. And so what we can now start to do is answer the question, when does submodality become content? When does content become submodality? And I give the example of a classroom with a large whiteboard and a classroom with a large blackboard. How do we codify those two representations with the same submodality set? Because at some point, a submodality is content, and at some point, content is submodality. So analogical and digital stuff occur on the same continuum. Now, where they are is going to be fairly subjective, I suspect, according to context and experience of that context by the person. So, where am I going with all this? We have submodalities that aren't just expressed in the classic visual sense where you have from your NLP training the list. Is it focused? Is it blurred? Is it moving? Is it still? Is it bright? Is it dull? Is it in color? Is it black and white? Is it framed? Is it panoramic? And when people go through these lengthy lists, as though asking all those questions gives it away. Those who are familiar with, say, people like Eric Robbie's work with his submodality eye accessing cues, there's a lot of stuff you can look at in examining people's communication and how they present their communication in the analogs. They are showing you the submodality sets. Eric did comment actually on his Facebook page a couple of years back, where's that video gone? He's mysteriously taking it away. I'd actually deleted it ages ago because it was upsetting people, and I thought, well, I'm trying to be friendly now. But there are ways that are very obvious that when people have a particular submodality set, you can see it in both their expression, how they move, and how they move their eyes. I'm not going to go into any of that stuff now. Go to Eric Robbie, you'll find him. He teaches all that stuff. It's useful stuff to know. Now, there's other things you can look at as well. And if you look at a room of people, have a look at how they dress and how they express themselves. So there's some characters who, just by looking at them, you think they're a very colourful character. They have lots of colourful makeup on. They might have things in their hair that are bright and colourful. They might be wearing bright, colourful clothes. And then you have people like myself who tend to wear black. What do you think that's revealing about how they represent things internally and how they prefer to perceive things? So I moved from being someone who sees things in a continuum. So when I was younger and trying to be the very liberal, progressive, open-minded young man, understanding the world, I would basically think in terms of progressive values, that nothing is black and white, everything is actually arguable and a shade of grey. Now, as I got older and the inevitable thing starts to happen, become much more conservative, much more black and white, much more fixed on how the world is. But I recognise that everything exists in a shade of grey is one of the least ways of being functional. Have a look at the differences between people who never have an opinion. They never see anything as being it's either that or it's that. Everything for them is on a continuum, and everything is arguable. They never have a position of their own. They can always see the other person's position. Have a look at how functional that individual actually is in the world. And that was what I began to notice, both in some of the NLP people and some of the trainers in varying things that I was aware of, but also just people generally. I then shifted, although I've always been a fan of wearing black, I shifted very much to black and white. I like high levels of contrast. And those who are familiar with my stuff, I tend to talk in overgeneralizations with how I present stuff. Everything is either that or it's that. It's one or the other. And then I stick with that position. What I found was both my life became much more functional, but also other people could understand my position, as opposed to never having an analogical position on anything, never having a digital position on anything, because everything is in a state of flux. It's a terrible experience to be stuck inside of. And if you are associated with someone like that, it can be very hard to predict what they do next, because they constantly change their position on things. They can always change it. There's always a counter view. They can always be very balanced, sitting on the fence, all that kind of stuff. Just while I'm on a little rant, I wonder how many of those things are actually is cowardice dressed up as virtue. It's just one of my little thoughts there. Comment section if you disagree with that. So what was I talking about with this? Pay attention to the analogical relationship of the communication that is delivered, and look for some kind of either complementary relationship or congruency. For example, people who say "I love you" in an aggressive way. Some people who ask people out on a date in an aggressive or defensive or anxious way. That's the analogical aspect that's cutting across into the thing that is being said. If we're teaching something, what is it that we're teaching? So if we're teaching people literature, if I just go back to my school example of books, we want those people to enjoy reading books. We want people to enjoy the story, not sat on a hard chair in a classroom in silence with an institutional echo every time someone moves the chair. And if somebody dares whisper or make a noise to somebody else, they get told to shut up. One of the things about reading books is that it doesn't have to be a silent activity, and when we shut up, we stop talking. And most people read books with their internal dialogue. So enforcing silence whilst getting people to stare at a page may not be the most effective strategy for getting people to read. We may want to have an active internal dialogue, an active auditory system that is running. Then we can get into how do we start to create that internal dialogue to create the analogical relationship when we have an institutional echo and everyone has to shut up. Just worth thinking about some of these things. I think that's all I'm going to witter on here. Bit of a rambling of thoughts. Do please use the comment section below. If you have no idea, what's he talking about? Submodalities? What the hell is he talking about? Do get a copy of the book. There's on other videos I've done, people have made suggestions for resources of submodalities, so do have a look at those as well. This is all stuff that's related to the NLP stuff, which I don't actually teach. It's not something that I will cover. There's people far better able at teaching this stuff than I am. So thank you for watching my little video, and do please leave a comment, click that like button, and I'll see you in the next rambling video.